You ever look into someone's eyes and see a fire that used to burn, now reduced to cold ash? That's the look of a woman who's married, but utterly alone. Not because she's single, but because her soul has been starving for years. You see, when most people think about married women, they imagine stability, family, commitment, love, but they forget something essential. Marriage is not immunity from loneliness. In fact, sometimes it's the cause of it. Here's the brutal truth. Emotional neglect is more common than most people want to admit. And it doesn't always come with shouting or abuse. Sometimes it's quiet. A look that's missing. A hug that's half-hearted. Conversations that feel like business transactions. That's when emotional erosion begins. And here's what happens next. Slowly, the married woman starts to disappear. First to herself, then to her husband, and finally, to the world around her. Her dreams get boxed up. Her personality gets filtered. Her needs get delayed permanently. And while everyone else claps for her perfect life, she's dying on the inside. That's the woman who becomes emotionally vulnerable. That's the one who listens harder when someone new talks to her. That's the one who starts to feel alive when anyone, finally notices her. And let's be honest, people notice. The guy at work who pays her a compliment. It hits different. Not because she's weak, but because she's been starving for acknowledgement. That stranger who actually listens when she speaks. She remembers that moment for days. Why? Because at home, she's invisible. Emotional neglect doesn't look like a broken bone. It doesn't come with warning signs. It sneaks in during late nights, when conversations dry up. It settles in when she realizes that even in a full house, she's still alone. Her husband may be a good provider, a good father, even a decent man. But emotionally, he's absent. He doesn't ask her how she feels. He doesn't check in when she's down. He doesn't notice the shift in her energy. And slowly, someone else might. Because attention is a drug, especially when you've been sober from it for too long. A woman who's emotionally neglected starts to develop radar for anyone who gives her what she's missing. Emotional connection becomes her oxygen. Validation becomes addictive. And connection, even with the wrong person, becomes irresistible. Let's get real. It's not always about looks. It's not about money. It's not even about sex. The real power is in being seen. If she's emotionally neglected long enough, she will gravitate toward the person who makes her feel real again. Now ask yourself this. Is that weakness, or is that human? Emotional neglect breaks down even the strongest. And here's the danger. Most married women don't even realize they're emotionally starved until someone else comes along and feeds them what they didn't know they were missing. That's the moment everything shifts. One compliment turns into a conversation. One conversation turns into a connection. And that connection, it becomes sacred. Because when someone makes you feel emotionally safe, you start to feel free. You start to feel like you again. For a woman neglected at home, that feeling is like a high. It's rare, it's sacred, and it's dangerous. Because it rewires her emotional loyalty, often without her realizing it. And no, it doesn't mean she's a bad person, or that she's looking to cheat. It just means that she's desperate for something deeper, something she used to have, something she may have never really felt at all. The world judges her for being open to temptation, but the world never looked close enough to see what she's really missing. It's easy to shame. It's harder to understand. So here's the uncomfortable reality. If a woman is emotionally neglected in her marriage, her heart is already wandering, long before her body ever does. Her loyalty becomes brittle. Her soul becomes thirsty. And whoever speaks her emotional language owns the room. But there's a catch. Because the person who steps into that emotional vacancy holds a dangerous power. If he's genuine, he could heal what her marriage never could. But if he's not, if he's just playing a game, he becomes a mirror of the man who hurt her. Another chapter in the same book of pain. That's why emotional neglect is the first and perhaps most dangerous vulnerability in married women. It's the silent killer of relationships. It doesn't break things all at once. It just erodes them, until what was once love becomes duty, until what was once connection becomes cohabitation. And then all it takes is one person, on the right day, saying the right words, to a woman who forgot what it feels like to be adored. It's not about being easy prey. It's about being emotionally abandoned. And in that vacuum, even a whisper feels like a lifeline. So next time you assume a married woman has it all, look again. She might be surrounded by family, wearing a ring, posting smiling pictures. But deep down, she's waiting for someone to ask, "Are you okay?" For someone to mean it. Because in the absence of emotional presence, the heart becomes desperate. Not for attention, but for understanding. And that is the one thing she hasn't had in a long, long time. You want to know the fastest way to hollow out a woman's soul? Stop touching her, not just with your hands, but with your presence. Go ahead. Make her feel like she's just another item on your to-do list. Stop looking at her like she matters. Watch what happens. People think intimacy means sex. It doesn't. Intimacy is energy. It's attention. It's the way your fingers pause on someone's back when they walk by. The way your eyes linger when they're speaking. The way you reach for them without needing a reason. Now, imagine being married and having none of that. Imagine lying next to someone every night, hearing their breathing, feeling the mattress shift, and still feeling like you're on another planet. Married in name, strangers in practice. You think that doesn't change a person? A married woman who hasn't been touched with desire, who hasn't felt wanted in months, maybe years, becomes someone else. Not overnight, but over time, a part of her starts to shrink. That soft, sensual, feminine part, she locks it away, because showing it does nothing. Expressing it gets ignored, and eventually, she stops trying. But deep down, the craving never dies. She still wants to feel beautiful, still wants to feel chosen, still wants to feel skin-on-skin connection that doesn't feel like a routine or worse, an obligation. And that's the crack in the wall. Because all it takes is one person, one man, who sees her the way her husband hasn't in years. And not in a vulgar way, but in a way that says, "You're still stunning, still magnetic, still deeply wanted." That look, that energy, it's more addictive than anything else on earth. Because it's not just about arousal. It's about remembrance. It reminds her of who she used to be, before the silence, before the indifference, before her body became a ghost inside her own home. You think she doesn't notice when someone's eyes drift toward her lips during conversation? When someone accidentally brushes her arm, then lingers a second too long? When someone sends a compliment that lands exactly where she forgot she had nerve endings? Of course she notices. Her body's been waiting. Because lack of intimacy doesn't just affect her physically, it affects her emotionally. It seeps in her confidence, into her self-worth, into how she shows up in the world. A woman who isn't touched starts to pull away from herself, from the mirror, from the things that once made her glow. She might stop dressing up, might stop flirting, might stop smiling the way she used to. Not because she doesn't want to, but because it feels pointless. And then someone else comes along and makes her feel seen. Not necessarily with grand gestures. Sometimes just a simple compliment, a real conversation, a moment of shared laughter that doesn't feel forced. And it unlocks something, not lust, but life. That's the thing most people miss. When a woman hasn't been touched, hasn't been desired, hasn't been kissed like she matters, she becomes emotionally dehydrated. And when she finally gets a drop of water, she comes back to life. It's not about cheating. It's not about betrayal. It's about the ache of disconnection and how strong that ache becomes when nobody is trying to fix it. You want the truth? Some husbands think their job ends at providing, paying the bills, fixing the sink, driving the kids around. But they forget one essential role, being a lover. Not just physically, but emotionally, romantically, spiritually. When that role disappears, the marriage doesn't fall apart. It just slowly turns into a contract, a series of shared tasks and polite interactions. Meanwhile, the woman inside that marriage is grieving. Not because she wants another man, but because she wants the one she married to show up again, to want her, to reach for her without prompting, to remind her that she still matters in that way. And when that doesn't happen, she starts to believe she's not desirable anymore, that maybe she's changed, maybe she's too old, too tired, too unworthy. until someone else comes along and shows her that none of that is true. That's when danger shows up, not because she's looking for trouble, but because someone finally gave her what she's been missing. And now she's remembering what it feels like to be kissed with intention, to be looked at like art, to be spoken to like a woman, not a roommate. And don't get it twisted, the absence of intimacy isn't always mutual. Sometimes the husband still wants her, but stops showing it. Other times, he's become complacent. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he's distracted. Maybe he thinks she's not interested anymore. But she is. She just needs to feel safe again, desired again, needed again. The point is this. If a woman doesn't feel physically or emotionally intimate in her relationship, she becomes a different version of herself. One who's more open to someone who notices her again. Someone who touches her hand with real interest. Who looks at her like she's not just a wife or a mom, but a woman. And that moment of rediscovery, it changes everything. Because now she remembers, I'm still alive. I'm still powerful. I'm still wanted. And she wonders why her husband couldn't see that. Or worse, why he stopped trying to. That's why lack of intimacy isn't a small issue. It's a slow death. One that makes a married woman vulnerable not because she's bored, but because she's starved. And once she tastes real closeness again, it's almost impossible to go back to the cold, the silence, the routine, the distance. You can only go without oxygen for so long before your body starts gasping for air. And for a woman, intimacy is that air. So the next time she blushes at a compliment, or smiles a little longer than usual, or walks away from conversation with fire in her eyes, don't assume she's being reckless. She might just be remembering what it feels like to be alive. She used to be someone. Before the house. Before the kids. Before the endless routines and the daily chaos. There was a version of her that was wild, confident, ambitious, alive. But somewhere along the way, that woman got buried under roles, expectations, and sacrifices. And now, she's not sure who she is anymore. This is the part nobody warns you about. That getting married, becoming a wife, a mother, a partner, can sometimes erase the very identity that once made you feel like you. Not on purpose, not in one dramatic moment, but little by little. It starts with compromise, giving up a hobby, saying no to a passion, canceling plans because someone else needs you more. And it feels like the right thing to do, because it is the right thing sometimes. But what they don't tell you is, every time you put yourself second, a part of you slips away. Until one day, you look in a mirror and you don't recognize who's staring back. She's responsible. She's committed. She's tired. And maybe she's even admired by friends, family, neighbors. But inside, she's lost. The fire that once burned in her is now just embers. She functions. She performs. She delivers. But she doesn't feel like herself anymore. That's the root of identity crisis. And it's one of the most invisible forms of emotional vulnerability in married women. Because the world sees her as put together, as successful, as loving. But no one sees that she hasn't read a book just for pleasure in years. That she stopped doing her hair the way she likes it. That she's forgotten what it feels like to wake up excited for her own day, not just managing everyone else's. And into that emptiness steps something or someone. Maybe it's a conversation that reminds her of a dream she buried. Maybe it's a man who asks her a question that no one's asked in a decade. What do you want? Or maybe it's just a sudden realization that she's been living in autopilot and the real her hasn't driven the wheel in years. That moment is powerful because when a woman loses her identity in a relationship and then suddenly remembers it, the effect is explosive. It's like reconnecting with a long-lost best friend. And everything she thought she gave up starts calling her name again. And it's not always dramatic. It doesn't mean she's going to leave or change her life overnight. But it does mean she's open. Open to attention, to reflection, to rediscovery, and yes, to temptation. Because whoever helps her reconnect with her forgotten self becomes magnetic. Not because he's better, not because he's more attractive, but because he sees her not just as a wife or a mom, but as a woman, a thinker, a dreamer, a person who still matters on her own terms. You have to understand how rare that feels to her. In her marriage, She might be seen as dependable, as nurturing, as strong, but not as curious, not as playful, not as bold. Those parts of her got labeled as distractions or immature or selfish. So she buried them, smothered them, sacrificed them for the family. But that part of her never really died. It just waited for someone to ask the right question, to show genuine interest in her mind, to talk to her like she's more than a support system. And when that finally happens, she feels more than seen. She feels resurrected. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because once she tastes that version of herself again, the one who is bold and creative and unapologetic, she starts to crave it. And she starts to resent the version of life that demanded she give it up in the first place. She starts to question things. Why did I stop painting? Why don't I travel anymore? Why did I shrink for everyone else's comfort? And sometimes the answers to those questions are painful because they force her to admit that she's been living a role, not a life. That her marriage may have functioned more like a contract than a connection. That she's been so busy being everything for everyone else, she forgot to be herself. That's when identity crisis turns into vulnerability. Because when someone, even a stranger, encourages her to step back into her power, her creativity, her freedom, she listens. She listens hard, because it's not just about feeling loved. It's about feeling real. She remembers the woman who used to walk into rooms with confidence, who used to laugh without guilt, who used to wear what she wanted, say what she meant, and dream without limits. That woman didn't disappear. She just got quiet. Now she's waking up, and the person who helps her wake up, he becomes important. Not because of who he is, but because of what he represents, her return to herself. And in that emotional state, loyalty starts to shift. Not because she wants to betray anyone, but because she's choosing herself for the first time in years. And that is powerful. Not every woman acts on it, but the emotional pull is real. Because when your soul has been in hibernation for so long, the one who helps thaw, it becomes unforgettable. It's not about being easy prey. That's the wrong narrative. It's about being unfulfilled, forgotten, muted. And the moment someone hands her the mic back, she starts to speak again, louder and clearer than ever. So if you see a married woman start to change her style, pick up an old passion, or talk more freely, she's not just going through a phase. She's going through a return. A return to the woman she was before the world told her to shrink. Before marriage taught her to settle. Before she lost herself trying to be everything for everyone. And that version of her, she's not vulnerable. She's dangerous. Because now she knows who she is, and she's not giving that up again for anyone. She's not in love with you. She's in love with freedom. With the version of herself she imagines when you're around. You're not her fantasy. You're the door that opens to it. That's the real reason she keeps looking back over her shoulder when you speak. Because when a married woman becomes emotionally vulnerable, it's rarely just about the man standing in front of her. It's about the life she's quietly suffocating in. The life she built, stayed loyal to, sacrificed for, and now sometimes secretly resents. Not because it's all bad, but because somewhere along the line, it started to feel like a trap. Not a prison made of steel and bars, but of routine, obligation, predictability, familiar faces asking the same questions, daily conversations filled with logistics, groceries, bills, schedules, carpools, and no one asking her what she's dreaming about anymore. She wakes up each morning with a task list, not a purpose. She goes to bed every night knowing tomorrow will feel the same. The same four walls, the same conversations, the same expectations. It's not painful, it's numbing. And that's sometimes worse. Because when life gets dull enough, the mind starts to escape. And it escapes into fantasy. That's the secret most people never see. She doesn't need her world to fall apart to feel trapped. She just needs to feel unseen for long enough. That's when a fantasy begins. It could start small, a random thought, a quick daydream. What if she had chosen a different path? What if she had taken that job offer, moved to that city, or stayed single a little longer? What if she had chased her ambitions instead of shelving them to be the dependable wife, the selfless mother, the glue holding everything together? That little what if starts as a whisper. Then one day, someone says something that stirs it up. Someone looks at her differently. Someone makes her laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. And suddenly, the whisper becomes a voice. Not just a voice, a temptation. But here's what's dangerous. It's not always the person she's drawn to. It's the escape he symbolizes. He doesn't just flirt with her. He flirts with her imagination. He reminds her of a world beyond her responsibilities. A world where she can be light, reckless, wild, spontaneous, things she hasn't been in years. He doesn't need to say much, just enough to spark the idea that there's more to life than carpool lines and calendar alerts. That somewhere out there, she could be something more than just a wife. That maybe she could live for herself again, even if just for a moment. That idea, it grows fast, because it's not rooted in logic, it's rooted in emotion. Emotion that's been buried under years of self-denial. Emotion that's been waiting for someone to unlock it. And it's not that she's miserable. She might even love her husband. She probably adores her kids. But love and suffocation can exist side by side. That's the part people don't want to admit. That you can be grateful for everything in your life and still feel like you're not living your own life at all. That duality eats at her. And the longer it goes on, the more the escape becomes romanticized. She doesn't just imagine leaving, she imagines reclaiming. Reclaiming time, joy, adventure, identity, autonomy. And the person who makes her feel those things, even in fragments, becomes intoxicating. And no, she's not blind. She knows he might not be perfect. He might not be better. But that's not the point. He represents the chance to feel again. And that's more seductive than any physical attraction could ever be. Because when someone gives her an emotional exit, a chance to mentally step out of the cage she's been sitting in, she clings to it. Even if just her mind. Even if nothing ever happens. That imagined freedom is powerful. It gives her something to look forward to fantasize about, to wake up for. You have to understand, the fantasy isn't always about leaving. It's about being missed, being chosen, being told, you don't have to carry everything by yourself anymore. It's about the idea that there's still a version of her that hasn't been swallowed by sacrifice. And the man who taps into that part of her, who listens when no one else does, who compliments when no one else notices, who laughs with her when life feels too serious. He becomes more than a person. He becomes a symbol of the life she could be living, even if she never acts on it, even if she never crosses a line. That idealization stays with her. It changes the way she moves, the way she sees her home, the way she responds to her husband, because now she has something to compare everything to. That's the emotional drift most marriages don't see coming. It's not always about disloyalty. Sometimes it's just about disconnection. When her real life feels empty, her fantasy life becomes rich. And once she starts feeding that alternate version of herself, it becomes harder and harder to come back to reality. Especially when reality feels like a life she didn't entirely choose, or at least not one she consciously created for herself. And the truth is, this doesn't make her a villain. It makes her human. We all escape in our minds sometimes. But when a woman is emotionally depleted, unfulfilled, and locked into cycles of duty with no emotional reward, that escape becomes the only space where she still feels alive. So if you see her staring out the window longer than usual, if you notice her smiling at texts that make her look younger, if she starts wearing perfume again, or putting on lipstick she hasn't worn in years, it might not be for someone else. It might be for the version of herself she sees in the mirror of her mind, the one who's not stuck, the one who's not tired, the one who still believes she can have more. She's not in love with you. She's in love with what you make her feel. Not seen, not heard, free. Tell a woman she's beautiful when she hasn't heard it in years, and you'll see her entire posture change. Tell her she's wanted, not needed, not obligated, and you'll watch her soul return to her eyes. It's not the compliment that moves her. It's the fact that someone finally sees her again. Let me tell you something that will make some people uncomfortable. Many married women are addicted to validation, and they don't even know it. Not in the obvious ways. Not always with selfies or flirty DMs. No, it's quieter than that. More subtle, but more dangerous. Because it hides behind performance, behind perfect homes, well-dressed kids, smiling family photos, and scheduled routines. She does everything right, not for applause, but because she doesn't know who she is without it. And deep down, she needs someone, anyone, to tell her she's doing okay. You have to understand what this kind of life can do to a woman. For years, she's been measured by her output. How much she gives, how well she manages chaos, how selfless she can be. And with every sacrifice, she gets a little praise, maybe. But usually, she just gets expectations. She becomes the backbone of the household, the planner, the emotional regulator, the cook, the lover, the nurse, the therapist. And if she ever drops the ball, people ask, what's wrong with her? But when she holds it all together, nobody says thank you. And so she starts to wonder, am I only valuable when I'm useful? That's the seed of it. That question, that quiet ache for reassurance, for appreciation, for someone to look at her not for what she does, but for who she is. And when that doesn't come from inside the home, she starts to look outward. That's where external validation creeps in. And it doesn't take much. A compliment from a stranger, a random like on social media, a man who looks twice, a coworker who notices her hair, a friend who says, you still got it. Each moment becomes a fix, a brief high, a reminder that she hasn't disappeared completely. Because at home, she might feel invisible. But out there, in small stolen moments, she starts to feel like a woman again, not just a function. And it's easy to judge her for that, to say she should validate herself, that she should be content without outside attention. But here's the truth. When the people closest to you stop pouring into you emotionally, you start to dry out. And when you dry out, even a single drop of water feels like salvation. It's not about vanity. It's about emotional survival. You see, married women, especially the ones who carry the emotional load of their families, often feel like they're on autopilot, day in, day out, doing everything right but feeling nothing real. They lose connection with their own self-worth. And when they no longer feel chosen in their own home, they start craving that feeling somewhere else. That craving doesn't make them weak. It makes them starved. And whoever gives her that validation, even unintentionally, becomes a source of light. A man who says, you have such a presence, and actually means it, she'll remember that line for weeks. A look that lingers for a second longer than necessary. She'll feel that gaze in her bloodstream. Not because she wants to be disloyal, but because she wants to feel alive. Here's the part people ignore. Validation isn't about ego. It's about identity. When a woman relies too much on external validation, it usually means she no longer knows how to see herself without someone else's reflection. She's so used to adapting, so used to serving, that she forgot how to be. So when someone comes along who reminds her of her worth, it's not just flattering, it's intoxicating. And that's where things get dangerous. Because now, she's emotionally bonded to the source of her validation. She might not realize it at first. It might seem innocent, friendly, harmless, but it's not. Because now, her mood changes depending on how this person responds to her. She starts dressing differently, checking her phone more, thinking about how to keep that attention alive. And no, it doesn't mean she's easy prey. That phrase misses the point completely. She's not looking for a fling. She's looking for recognition. And she's been deprived of it for so long, she doesn't realize how much she depends on it. In some ways, it's not even about the man. He could disappear, and she'd still be chasing the feeling he gave her. Because the feeling wasn't about him. It was about seeing herself through different eyes. She wants to feel desirable, not in the shallow sense, but in the sense that someone actually notices her essence. Her voice, her laugh, her depth, her power. When her husband stops doing that, or never really did, it creates a hole that doesn't stay empty for long. Something will fill it, and often, it's whoever is paying attention. And let's be clear, this is not just a problem. It's a marriage problem, a cultural problem, a problem created by years of expecting women to pour endlessly from their emotional well and never need a drop back. But everyone needs something back. Even the strongest woman, even most loyal wife, even the most selfless mother. At some point, she needs someone to look her in the eye and say, I see you. I want you, just as you are. And if that doesn't come from inside the home, she starts looking for it elsewhere, in glances, in messages, in voices that make her feel less like a machine and more like a woman again. That's why external validation becomes addictive, because it fills what her marriage left hollow. Not permanently, not perfectly, but just enough to keep her going, to remind her that she still exists beneath all the titles and tasks. And the man who offers that without manipulation, just genuine presence, will leave an imprint, maybe even a mark she never forgets. Because it's not about wanting attention. It's about needing to feel real again. And when your worth has been ignored long enough, even a whisper of it feels like a roar.